In the overgrown edges of Jefferson Middle School's soccer field, a quiet, soft-spoken girl with downcast eyes was about to face the unthinkable in front of a crowd that never saw her. What started as a reluctant shortcut home from class took a shocking turn when she came face to face with three notorious bullies armed with smirks and sharpened cruelty. Elena Merris wasn't your typical 8th grade wallflower. For nearly 2 years, she had spent her life training in Krav Maga with her late older brother, a combat instructor known for drilling her through fear, fury, and failure until she never flinched again when she encountered the pack of girls. Laughing as they ripped the back of her shirt, she had no idea she was about to reclaim her power and shatter their hold over the school. Elena moved with a calm precision, a choice that would lead to a violent reckoning and the shattering of a toxic social hierarchy. What began as another humiliating day for a girl too scared to speak up would become the legend of the day silence. Struck back with fists and fire in her eyes, the halls of Jefferson would never be the same after Elena's brutal, unforgettable stand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches, you make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The evening started like any other in the Wallace household. Sophia. Lynn wiped down the granite countertops of their Boston brownstone, her movements methodical and practiced after 12 years of marriage. The dinner dishes were already loaded into the dishwasher, and upstairs she could hear Leela helping 9-year-old Zoe with her math homework. At 38, Sophia had perfected the rhythm of domestic life, the quiet efficiency that kept their world running smoothly while Ethan built his tech empire. She was reaching for the kitchen island's lower cabinet when her elbow caught the corner of Ethan's leather briefcase. The expensive bag toppled, spilling its contents across the hardwood floor in a cascade of papers, tech patents, and board meeting notes. Sophia sighed, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered documents. Her husband's life was always so meticulously organized. He'd be irritated if anything was out of place. The first few pages were familiar quarterly reports, investor presentations, the usual detritus of a successful AI startup CEO. But as she reached for a document that had slid beneath the island, her blood turned to ice. The header made her stomach drop. Petition for divorce, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Her name was there, typed in cold legal formatting. Sophia Lynn Wallace, respondent. But the woman described in the pages that followed was a stranger, emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, unfit for primary custody of minor children. Each phrase hit like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her hands shake as she read. The documents were thorough, professionally drafted, and devastating. According to the petition, she was an unstable housewife who had abandoned her career due to inability to handle professional stress, who made irrational financial decisions, and who displayed concerning emotional volatility around their daughters. The custody recommendation suggested that Ethan should have primary physical custody, with Sophia receiving supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation. She sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her marriage, and felt something cold and calculating settle in her chest. This wasn't a moment of passion or a sudden decision. The documents were dated 3 weeks ago, but references to ongoing behavioral concerns stretched back months. Ethan had been building this case systematically, documenting every argument, every moment of stress, every time she'd raised her voice or cried in frustration. Her paralegal training, dormant for over a decade, suddenly roared back to life. Without conscious thought, she pulled out her phone and began photographing every page, her hands steady now despite the earthquake in her chest. She uploaded the images to a secure cloud drive she hadn't used since her legal days, one Ethan didn't know existed. Every angle, every page, every damning word was captured and preserved. The sound of the front door opening made her heart slam against her ribs. She quickly gathered the papers, arranging them exactly as they'd been in the briefcase, and closed the flap. By the time Ethan rounded the corner into the kitchen, she was standing at the sink, rinsing a wine glass with studied casualness. "Hey, beautiful." His voice carried the same warm affection it always had as he crossed to kiss her cheek. "Sorry I'm late." The board meeting ran long. Sophia turned into his embrace, studying his face for any sign of deception. He looked exactly the same, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, blue eyes tired but kind, the same small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. This was the man who had held her hair when she was sick with morning sickness, who had cried when Leela took her first steps, who had promised to love her forever when she'd walked away from her legal career to support his dreams. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice betraying nothing. "Really well, actually. We're looking at another round of funding." He loosened his tie, the same routine he'd followed for years. "Where are the girls? Homework?" "Zoe's struggling with fractions again." He nodded absently, already reaching for his briefcase. "I need to review some contracts before tomorrow's call." She watched him carry the bag toward his home office, the same bag that contained the blueprint for destroying her life. When he disappeared around the corner, she gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles went white. That night, she lay awake beside him, listening to his even breathing and replaying the last few months with new clarity. His increased travel schedule, the way he'd started documenting every argument in his phone, claiming he was taking notes for couples therapy we should consider. His subtle questioning about her day, her mood, her interactions with the girls. The concerned comments to friends about her adjustment struggles since leaving work. He'd been building a case against her for months, maybe longer. And she'd been completely oblivious. The next morning, Sophia called in sick to her volunteer work at the girls' school and drove to Back Bay. She parked 3 blocks away from the cafe where she'd arranged to meet Julia Mercatho, scanning the street for any sign of Ethan's car or his colleagues. Her paranoia felt both justified and surreal. 12 hours ago, she'd been a trusting wife. Now she was operating like a woman whose life depended on secrecy. Julia was already seated in the corner booth when Sophia arrived, her silver hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn 15 years ago when she'd mentored Sophia through her paralegal certification. Time had added lines around her dark eyes and gravitas to her presence, but Julia Mercatho remained exactly what she'd always been, a force of nature in a perfectly tailored suit. "You look terrible," Julia said without preamble as Sophia slid into the booth. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. When Sophia Lynn calls me after 12 years and says it's an emergency, I clear my schedule." Julia's eyes sharpened with professional interest. "Now tell me what's happening." Sophia pulled out her phone and opened the secure cloud folder. "I found these in my husband's briefcase last night." Julia's expression grew darker with each image she scrolled through. When she finished, she set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, her jaw tight with controlled anger. "This is sophisticated," she said finally. "And unfortunately, it's becoming more common. High-net-worth divorces where the primary earner tries to weaponize mental health claims to gain custody while minimizing financial obligations. Would it work if you'd walked into court unprepared?" "Possibly." Julia's voice carried the cold precision that had made her legendary in Boston family courts. "The narrative is carefully constructed. You left your career, which they're framing as inability to handle stress, rather than supporting your family. You're financially dependent, which becomes irresponsible rather than dedicated mother. Every normal moment of parental frustration becomes evidence of instability." Sophia felt the familiar burn of tears but blinked them back. Crying now would only prove Ethan's point about her emotional volatility. "But you're not walking into court unprepared," Julia continued. "You found this before he filed. That gives us an enormous advantage." "Us?" Did you think I was going to let some tech bro destroy one of my best former paralegals without a fight? Julia's smile was sharp as a blade. Besides, I take cases like this personally. Men who weaponize the system against women deserve to have that system turned against them. Julia ordered another coffee and pulled out a legal pad. Tell me about your marriage. Start from the beginning. For the next hour, Sophia detailed her life with Ethan, meeting in graduate school, when she was pursuing her paralegal certification and he was getting his MBA. Their courtship, built on shared ambitions, and long conversations about changing the world. Her decision to leave her promising legal career when Lila was born, not because she couldn't handle the stress, but because Ethan's startup demanded 80-hour weeks and someone needed to raise their daughter. I was good at my job, Sophia said, the words coming easier now. I love the research, the strategy, the way everything had to fit together perfectly. But Ethan was building something important, and we agreed that one of us should be home with the kids. And now he's using that sacrifice against you. Everything I gave up to support him, he's turned into evidence that I'm weak. The anger was building now, steady and warming. The career I walked away from becomes proof I couldn't handle professional responsibility. The financial dependence that was supposed to be temporary becomes evidence of irresponsibility. Julia nodded grimly. It's a classic strategy. Isolate, create dependency, then use that dependency as evidence of unfitness. She made several notes. But here's what he doesn't know. You still have that paralegal brain. And you found his plan before he implemented it. What do? We build a better case than his, fast. Julia pulled out her phone. I'm calling Jordan Ackerman. He's a private investigator, former police detective who specializes in high-conflict divorce cases. If your husband is planning this systematically, he's hiding other things too. 20 minutes later, Jordan Ackerman slid into their booth. He was younger than Sophia had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of forgettable face that probably served him well in surveillance work. His handshake was firm, his eyes alert and kind. Julia filled me in on the basics, he said without preamble. Successful tech CEO, planning a stealth divorce, trying to paint his wife as unstable. How long has he been acting differently? Sophia thought back over the past year, maybe 6 months. He started traveling more, working later. But that wasn't unusual. His company's been growing fast. Any changes in his routine? New passwords, second phone, different gym schedule. He's been more secretive with his phone lately. And he started going to the gym at odd times, early morning, late evening. Jordan made notes in a small notebook. I'll start with basic surveillance. Where he goes, who he sees, what his real schedule looks like. If he's planning something this elaborate, chances are good there's a woman involved. The word hit Sophia like a slap, though she realized part of her had been expecting it. An affair? It's common in cases like this, Julia said gently. Create emotional distance, establish a new relationship, then use the spouse's natural reaction to the betrayal as evidence of instability. Sophia stared at the table, processing this new layer of potential betrayal. How long would that take to discover? Give me a week, Jordan said. Maybe less. Men like your husband, successful, confident, used to getting what they want, they tend to get sloppy when they think they're in control. Julia leaned forward. Sophia, I need you to understand what we're up against. If Ethan has been planning this for months, he's probably been documenting everything. Recording arguments, saving texts, maybe even video surveillance. We need to be smarter and more thorough than he is. I can do that. The words came out steadier than Sophia felt. What do you need from me? First, absolute secrecy. No one can know you're building a case, not your mother, not your closest friends, no one. Second, I need you to start documenting everything. Every interaction with Ethan, every moment with your daughters, every decision you make. Create a narrative of the real Sophia Lynn Wallace. And third, Jordan added, act normal. Whatever you do, don't change your behavior patterns. If he's watching for signs that you know something, any deviation from your routine could tip him off. Sophia nodded, feeling her old professional instincts fully awakening. When do we start? We already have, Julia said. Jordan will begin. Surveillance today. I'll start building your legal strategy. And you're going to go home and be the perfect wife while we gather the evidence to destroy his case before he can file it. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Julia caught Sophia's arm. You sure you're ready for this? Once we start, there's no going back. Sophia thought about the papers in Ethan's briefcase, about the careful way he'd constructed his version of her life, about the daughters who deserved better than a father willing to manipulate the system to serve his own needs. I should have started years ago, she said, armed with new awareness. Sophia began noticing things she'd previously dismissed as the normal stresses of Ethan's demanding career. The way he positioned his phone face down during dinner. How he'd started taking calls in his car instead of his home office. The subtle changes in his schedule that didn't quite align with the company calendar she'd helped him organize for years. On Thursday evening, she was folding laundry in their bedroom when she heard the unmistakable buzz of a second phone. Sound came from Ethan's gym bag, a different tone than his usual iPhone notification. When she looked, he was in the shower and the bag was zipped shut. She left it alone, but filed the information away. Jordan's first report came via encrypted email on Friday morning. The subject line was innocuous, regarding the Johnson consultation, but the contents made Sophia's hands shake as she read them in her car after school drop-off. Subject observed leaving office at 3:47 p.m. Wednesday, contrary to calendar showing. Meetings until 6 p.m. Proceeded to Mandarin Oriental Hotel. Met with female, approximately 35 to 40, dark hair, business attire. Subjects entered hotel together, exited separately after 2.5 hours. Female identified as Tessa Lang, coup of subjects. Company. Similar pattern observed Thursday. Sophia stared at the email until the words blurred. Tessa Lang. She knew that name. Ethan had mentioned his brilliant coup dozens of times over the past 2 years. The woman who'd helped him navigate their recent expansion, who understood the technical aspects of their AI platform better than anyone. The woman Ethan had praised as indispensable and brilliant and the perfect business partner. The woman who was sleeping with her husband. That evening, Sophia watched Ethan with new eyes as he told her about his day. He mentioned the quarterly review meeting that had run long, the difficult client call that had delayed his afternoon, the traffic that had made him late getting home. Every word was a lie, delivered with the same warm smile he'd always given her. How's Tessa working out? She asked casually as she served dinner. You've mentioned how valuable she's been lately. Oh, she's fantastic, Ethan said, cutting into his chicken with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm. Really gets the vision, you know. Sometimes I think she understands the platform better than I do. That's wonderful. You're lucky to have such a dedicated partner. The word partner hung in the air between them, and for just a moment, Sophia saw something flicker across Ethan's face. Guilt? Fear? But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. After dinner, while Ethan helped Layla with her science project, Sophia found herself studying their family photos with new understanding. The gradual shift in Ethan's body language over the past year, the way he'd started standing slightly apart from her in group pictures, the decrease in casual physical affection she'd attributed to stress and exhaustion. Saturday brought a company picnic that Sophia had forgotten about until Ethan mentioned it that morning. The girls were excited. They loved the elaborate events Ethan's company threw, with bounce houses and face painting and elaborate catered spreads. Sophia had attended dozens of these gatherings over the years, playing the role of the supportive CEO's wife, making conversation with investors and employees and their families. But this time, she watched with different eyes as Tessa Lang approached their family with a warm smile and a plate of cookies for the girls. "Mrs. Wallace, so wonderful to see you again," Tessa said, her voice carrying just the right note of professional friendliness. She was attractive in an understated way, dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, minimal makeup that somehow made her look both approachable and competent. "And Leela and Zoe, I brought these from that bakery downtown that your dad mentioned you love." Sophia watched her daughters' faces light up as they recognized Tessa, watched them chatter about school and soccer and their upcoming dance recital. Watched how naturally Tessa engaged with them, how easily she laughed at Zoe's jokes and listened to Lila's careful explanations of her art project. "Daddy's friend Tessa brings the best snacks," Zoe announced with 9-year-old certainty. Daddy's friend Tessa had clearly been around enough to earn that title. Sophia felt something cold and sharp settle in her stomach as she realized this woman hadn't just been sleeping with her husband. She'd been auditioning for the role of stepmother. "She seems lovely," Sophia said to Ethan later as they walked to their car, the girls running ahead with sugar-fueled energy. "She really is. The girls seem to like her." "They do." Sophia kept her voice neutral, conversational. "How long has she been so involved with the family events?" "Oh, you know how it is. Key employees get invited to everything." "She's been around for most of the major company functions this year." Most of the major company functions. While Sophia had been home with sick children or managing school events or simply not invited because Ethan had mentioned he'd be networking rather than socializing, she'd been systematically excluded from opportunities to observe her replacement in action. That night, after the girls were asleep, Sophia sat in her dark kitchen with a cup of tea and Jordan's latest surveillance photos on her phone. Ethan and Cone. Tessa leaving the office building together. Ethan and Tessa sharing what looked like an intimate dinner at a restaurant Sophia didn't recognize. Ethan and Tessa walking hand in hand through Boston Common like any other couple in love. The betrayal was deep and systematic. But what made it worse was the realization that Tessa Lang wasn't just stealing her husband. She was positioning herself to steal her entire life. The perfect corporate wife who understood Ethan's business, who could engage with his colleagues on their level, who could mother his children without the inconvenient emotional complexity of their actual mother. Sophia closed the photos and opened her laptop. It was time to start documenting everything with the same methodical precision that Ethan had used to build his case against her. If he wanted to play games with evidence and narratives and legal strategy, she would show him exactly what a paralegal could do when she set her mind to winning. Jordan's financial investigation revealed layers of deception that made the affair seem almost quaint by comparison. Sophia met him and Julia at the same Back Bay Cafe on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of October day that seemed designed for delivering bad news. "Your husband has been very busy," Jordan said, sliding a manila folder across the table, "and very clever." The documents inside painted a picture of systematic financial manipulation spanning 18 months. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands holding nearly $2 million. Cryptocurrency investments disguised through shell companies. A complex restructuring of Ethan's company equity that made his visible income appear significantly lower, while actually increasing his net worth. "This started long before you found those divorce papers," Julia said, her voice tight with professional anger. "He's been planning your disposal like a corporate acquisition." Sophia studied the bank statements and transfer records, her paralegal training helping her follow the paper trail even as her heart sank with each revelation. The Cayman accounts were opened 16 months ago, right after we had that big fight about Leela's private school tuition. "What was the fight about?" Jordan asked. "Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, he said. We needed to be more careful with spending. That the company was doing well, but we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves financially. Sophia's laugh was bitter. He made me feel guilty for wanting to give our daughter opportunities. All while he was hiding millions. Julia made notes on her legal pad. Classic financial abuse pattern. Create artificial scarcity to control spending, while secretly accumulating assets. Then use the spouse's financial irresponsibility as grounds for reduced support. There's more, Jordan continued. The cryptocurrency investments are particularly sophisticated. He's been converting company stock options into digital assets, then moving them through multiple wallets to obscure the trail. If you'd gone to court without knowing about this, his visible assets would have been maybe 30% of his actual worth. Sophia felt a cold fury building in her chest. Every time she'd suggested a family vacation or home improvement, every time she'd worried about college funds or retirement savings, Ethan had been sitting on a hidden fortune while lecturing her about fiscal responsibility. What do we do with this information? She asked. We get our own forensic accountant, Julia said. Someone who can trace every dollar and present it in a way that will make Judge Rivera very unhappy with your husband's dishonesty. That afternoon, Sophia began her own systematic documentation project. She created detailed spreadsheets tracking every household expense, every child-related cost, every family decision she'd made or responsibility she'd handled. Doctor's appointments, school conferences, ballet lessons, birthday parties, grocery shopping, homework supervision, the invisible labor that kept their family functioning while Ethan built his empire. She also started recording their conversations using an app Jordan had recommended. The first few recordings were mundane discussions about dinner plans and weekend activities. But gradually, patterns emerged that she'd never noticed before. You seem tense lately, Ethan said on Thursday evening as she prepared their daughter's lunches for the next day. Maybe you should consider talking to someone about your stress levels. The comment was casual, almost caring, but Sophia now recognized it as something else entirely. Every suggestion that she was struggling, every recommendation for therapy or medication, every observation about her emotional state was being filed away as evidence for his case. I'm fine, she replied calmly. Just busy with the girls' schedules. Sometimes I worry that you put too much pressure on yourself. It's not healthy to be so intense about every little thing. Sophia continued making sandwiches, her movement steady despite the rage building in her chest. I want to make sure they have everything they need. Of course you do. But maybe we should talk about finding you some help. Someone to take some of the pressure off. She turned to look at him, studying his face for any sign of genuine concern. Instead, she saw calculation, the same expression he wore during difficult business negotiations. What kind of help? I don't know. A therapist? Someone who could help you develop better coping strategies. Every word was a trap, designed to make her defensive or emotional. If she agreed, she was admitting to mental health struggles. If she refused, she was being unreasonable and resistant to help. Either response would support his narrative of instability. I'll think about it, she said finally, then changed the subject to Zoe's upcoming school play. Friday brought an unexpected complication. Sophia was reviewing Jordan's latest surveillance photos when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Tessa Lang's name, and for a moment, Sophia considered ignoring it. But curiosity won, Mrs. Wallace. This is Tessa Lang from Ethan's company. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Not at all. What can I do for you? Well, this is a bit awkward, but I wanted to ask if you'd be comfortable with me picking up the girls from school today. Ethan mentioned that you had a doctor's appointment and might need backup childcare. Sophia had no doctor's appointment. She'd been planning to spend the afternoon at the library, researching divorce law and custody precedents. But Ethan had apparently told Tessa otherwise and positioned his mistress as the helpful family friend stepping in to assist the overwhelmed wife. "That's very thoughtful," Sophia said carefully, "but I can manage. My appointment was actually rescheduled." "Oh." Tessa's disappointment seemed genuine. "Well, if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. The girls are such sweethearts. And I know how busy things can get." After hanging up, Sophia sat in her car outside the school, watching other mothers collect their children and wondering how many times Tessa had inserted herself into their family routine without Sophia's knowledge. How many school events had she attended? How many times had she offered to help with the girls, positioning herself as the reliable alternative to their supposedly struggling mother? That evening, she confronted Ethan about the childcare offer. "I asked Tessa to call you as a backup," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "You mentioned feeling overwhelmed lately, and she offered to help if needed." "When did I mention feeling overwhelmed? You're always talking about how busy you are. I thought you'd appreciate having options." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Sophia could see how she'd fallen for it for months. Her legitimate concerns about managing two children's schedules became evidence of being overwhelmed. Her desire to be involved in their lives became intensity and pressure. Her natural responses to his emotional withdrawal became proof of instability. But now she was recording everything. Every manipulation, every subtle suggestion that she was struggling, every attempt to position Tessa as the more suitable mother figure. The evidence was building, creating a clear picture of systematic psychological manipulation designed to support his legal strategy. November arrived with the kind of sharp, New England cold that made everything feel brittle and bright. Sophia had been building her case for 3 weeks, and the weight of her secret knowledge was becoming harder to carry. But Julia's strategy required patience. They needed Ethan to feel secure in his plan while they systematically dismantled it. "The key is maintaining normalcy," Julia had explained during their most recent meeting. "If he suspects you know anything, he'll accelerate his timeline or change tactics. We need him confident and predictable." So Sophia played the role of the devoted wife with Academy Award-worthy precision. She smiled when Ethan suggested couples counseling, knowing he planned to use her refusal as evidence of resistance to help. She agreed to the therapy sessions, knowing he would document every conversation as proof of her instability. Every move was calculated now, every response designed to serve her larger strategy. "I think it would be good for us to talk to someone together," she said on a Wednesday evening, watching Ethan's face carefully. "We seem to be disconnected lately." The suggestion caught him off guard. She could see him recalibrating, trying to figure out how to use her cooperation against her. That's great, Sophia. I'm glad you're open to getting help." The word help again, always help, as if her desire to improve their marriage was really an admission of personal failure. They scheduled an appointment with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a couples therapist recommended by Ethan. What he didn't know was that Julia had already researched Dr. Hendricks thoroughly. She was legitimate, ethical, and unlikely to be manipulated into supporting false narratives about spousal instability. The first session was a masterclass in manipulation. Ethan presented himself as the concerned husband worried about his wife's emotional state, her withdrawal from their social circle, her increasing intensity around the children's activities. "Sometimes I feel like I'm walking on eggshells," he sighed, his voice heavy with practiced concern. "Sophia gets so upset about things that used to roll off her back. Little things, if dinner isn't perfect, or if the girls' homework takes longer than expected." Dr. Hendricks took notes without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that seemed designed to get Sophia's perspective. But Sophia had prepared for this moment, had anticipated exactly how Ethan would frame their problems. "I think I have been more stressed lately," she admitted calmly. "Managing two children's schedules while Ethan's been traveling more has been challenging. But I wouldn't characterize my responses as unusual, just the normal frustrations of parenting. How much has Ethan's travel increased? Dr. Hendricks asked, significantly. He used to be home most evenings, but lately he's been working late several nights a week and traveling almost every weekend. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. The company's growing rapidly. These are temporary demands. Of course, Sophia said. I understand the pressures you're under. I just think we need to communicate better about expectations and support. It was a perfectly reasonable response, delivered without emotion or accusation. Ethan had been expecting defensiveness or tears ammunition for his instability narrative. Instead, he got thoughtful analysis and practical suggestions. After the session, as they walked to their cars, Ethan seemed frustrated. I'm proud of you for being so open, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Dr. Hendricks seems really insightful. She does. I think this could be helpful for both of us. That evening, Sophia found Tessa's earring in Ethan's car. A small, silver hoop, expensive and distinctive, tucked between the passenger seat cushions. She photographed it exactly where she found it, then left it there. Let him wonder if she'd seen it. Let him worry about what else she might have noticed. The coat next day brought an unexpected visit. Sophia was working in her home office, a small room, where she managed the family's finances and volunteer commitments, when the doorbell rang. Through the window, she saw a police cruiser in her driveway. The officer was young, probably mid-20s, with the kind of earnest demeanor that suggested he took his job seriously. Mrs. Wallace? I'm Officer Martinez with the Boston Police. We received a wellness check request regarding you and your children. Sophia's blood went cold. A wellness check? From whom? The caller preferred to remain anonymous, but they expressed concern about your mental state and your ability to care for your daughters safely. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Someone, almost certainly Tessa, acting on Ethan's instructions, had called the police to create an official record of concerns about Sophia's fitness as a mother. Officer, I'm not sure what the caller told you, but as you can see, I'm fine and my children are at school where they belong. Officer Martinez looked around the immaculate house, taking in the family photos and evidence of normal domestic life. Is there anything going on that might have prompted someone to be concerned? My husband and I are going through some marital difficulties, Sophia said carefully. It's possible that someone misinterpreted normal stress as something more serious. The officer made notes in his report. Even if he found no evidence of problems, the fact that a wellness check had been requested would become part of the official record. Exactly the kind of documentation Ethan could use to support his claims about her instability. After Officer Martinez left, Sophia called Julia immediately. They're escalating, Julia said grimly. This is actually good news. Good news? The police have an official record that someone was concerned about my mental health. Yes, but it's also evidence of harassment and manipulation. If we can prove that Ethan or Tessa orchestrated this false report, it will backfire spectacularly. In court, that afternoon, Jordan confirmed what Sophia had suspected. His surveillance had captured Tessa at a payphone, an almost anachronistic detail in the age of cell phones, making the call at exactly the time. The police station logged the wellness check request. She's smart enough to avoid using a traceable phone, Jordan said, but not smart enough to avoid being photographed making the call. The attack on her reputation was systematic and escalating, but every move they made created evidence of their campaign against her. Sophia was no longer just defending herself. She was building a case that would expose the depth of their manipulation. December 5th, 10th dawned gray and cold, the kind of Boston winter day that seemed to leach color from everything. Sophia stood in her bedroom, choosing her outfit with the same care a general might select armor before battle. She'd settled on a navy blue suit, professional but not aggressive, serious but not somber. Today was the day she would shatter Ethan's carefully constructed timeline. The briefcase in her hands contained 18 months of evidence: Jordan's surveillance photos, forensic accounting reports, recorded conversations, documentation of the false police report, and a comprehensive custody petition that would flip Ethan's narrative completely. Julia had spent weeks crafting their legal strategy, and now it was time to execute it. Ethan was presenting to his board of directors at 10 a.m., the same boardroom where he'd announced their engagement 12 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia as she parked across the street from the sleek glass building that housed his company's headquarters. She waited in the lobby until exactly 10:15, long enough for Ethan to be deep into his presentation, but not so long that the meeting would be over. The receptionist tried to stop her, but Sophia had learned from her paralegal days that confidence and purpose could overcome most obstacles. "I need to deliver some urgent documents to my husband," she said with the kind of calm authority that brooked no argument. "It's a family emergency." The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt endless. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Ethan at the head of the polished table, his presentation displayed on the wall-mounted screen. Board members, investors, and senior staff, including Tessa Lang, sat around the table. In rapt attention, Sophia knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for permission. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "Ethan, I need you to sign these documents immediately." The shock on his face was worth months of careful planning. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. As she approached the table, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with metronomic precision. "Sophia, what are you?" "Divorce papers," she said calmly, placing the thick manila envelope in front of him. "I'm filing for divorce, and I need your acknowledgement of service." The silence in the room was deafening. Sophia was aware of Tessa's sharp intake of breath, of board members exchanging uncomfortable glances, of Ethan's face cycling through shock, rage, and calculation in rapid succession. "This is hardly the appropriate venue," he began. "I disagree," Sophia interrupted. "Since your professional life and personal life seem to be so intertwined, I thought your colleagues should know about the changes coming to your personal circumstances, especially those who've been closely involved in our family affairs." Her gaze found Tessa for just a moment, long enough to see the other woman's face pale with understanding. "The papers include a comprehensive financial disclosure petition," Sophia continued, her voice never wavering from its professional tone. "I'm sure your board will be interested to know about the offshore accounts and cryptocurrency investments that somehow never made it into your standard financial reporting." Ethan's face had gone white. Around the table, she could see the board members processing the implications: financial irregularities, personal scandal, the kind of leadership instability that made investors nervous. "I'll be in touch through my attorney regarding the custody arrangements for Lila and Zoe," Sophia said, gathering her things. "I'm sure you'll want to review everything carefully before responding." She turned and walked toward the door, her back straight and her pace unhurried. Behind her, she could hear Ethan's voice, strained and desperate, trying to regain control of the room. "I'm sorry for the interruption. This is obviously a very difficult personal situation, but I want to assure everyone that it won't affect our business operations or—" Sophia closed the door behind her, cutting off his damage control efforts. In the elevator, she allowed herself one moment of pure satisfaction before her phone began buzzing with messages. By the time she reached her car, social media was already buzzing. Someone in that boardroom had clearly started sharing the story, and Boston's tight-knit tech community thrived on gossip about its most prominent figures. #Ethan Wallace was trending within an hour, with speculation ranging from financial scandal to marital drama. Julia called as Sophia was driving home. "How did it feel?" her attorney asked. "Better than I expected," Sophia admitted. Is it wrong that I enjoyed watching him scramble for control after what he put you through? I'd be worried if you didn't enjoy it a little. That afternoon brought the retaliation she'd been expecting. Ethan filed an emergency motion for immediate custody, claiming that Sophia's erratic behavior and public humiliation of their family proved her mental instability. The filing painted her dramatic serving of papers as evidence of poor judgment and emotional volatility. But Julia had anticipated this response. Their counterfiling was already prepared, complete with documentation of Ethan's systematic campaign to undermine Sophia's reputation and fitness as a mother. Let him play the victim, Julia said. Judge Rivera has seen this playbook before, and she doesn't like men who weaponize emergency motions for strategic advantage. Remember, Julia said as they sat in her office Sunday evening, he's going to try to make you emotional. Every question will be designed to provoke a reaction that supports his instability narrative. Stay factual, stay calm, and trust the evidence. Monday morning brought Judge Elena Rivera's courtroom, a space that managed to feel both imposing and intimate. Judge Rivera herself was exactly what Sophia had hoped for, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of presence that suggested she'd seen every manipulation tactic in the book. Ethan's attorney, Richard Blackwood, was everything Sophia had expected from one of Boston's most expensive divorce lawyers. Impeccably dressed, smoothly articulate, and utterly without conscience when it came to destroying opposing parties. Your Honor, Blackwood began, we're here because Mrs. Wallace has demonstrated concerning behavior that puts the welfare of the minor children at risk. Her decision to serve divorce papers in a public business setting, in front of board members and investors, shows a troubling disregard for her family's privacy and her husband's professional reputation. Julia's response was measured and devastating. Your Honor, what Mr. Blackwood characterizes as concerning behavior was actually a strategic decision by a woman who discovered that her husband had been systematically planning to destroy her reputation and steal her children. Mrs. Wallace chose a public venue because she'd learned that privacy in her marriage was an illusion. Her husband had been documenting and manipulating every private moment for months. The evidence presentation took most of the morning. Jordan's surveillance photos showing Ethan's affair with Tessa Lang, the forensic accounting that revealed hidden assets, recordings of Ethan's subtle gaslighting and manipulation, documentation of the false police report that Tessa had filed. When Sophia took the stand, she felt the calm focus that had carried her through the most difficult paralegal cases years earlier. Mrs. Wallace, Blackwood began, his tone suggesting paternal concern. Isn't it true that you've been struggling with the demands of motherhood lately? I've been managing the demands of single parenthood while my husband built a secret life, Sophia replied evenly. If that constitutes struggling, then I suppose I have been. But you did agree to seek counseling for your emotional difficulties? I agreed to couples counseling to address the problems in our marriage. I was unaware at the time that my husband was documenting our sessions as evidence for divorce proceedings I didn't know existed. Blackwood tried for 2 hours to provoke an emotional reaction, to catch her in a contradiction, to support Ethan's narrative of instability. But Sophia had spent months preparing for this moment, and every answer was backed by evidence. When Ethan took the stand, Julia's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Wallace, when did you first open the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? Those were legitimate business investments that you failed to disclose to your wife, despite a legal obligation to share financial information in your marriage? Sophia isn't involved in the business side of our finances because you deliberately excluded her from financial decisions while secretly moving marital assets beyond her knowledge. The questioning continued for an hour, each answer revealing another layer of deception and manipulation. By the time Julia finished, Ethan's carefully crafted image as the concerned husband had crumbled completely. Judge Rivera's ruling was swift and decisive. "I've presided over many high-conflict divorce cases," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience. "What I see here is not a case of maternal instability, but rather a systematic campaign to manufacture evidence of instability. Mr. Wallace's behavior, the financial deception, the documented affair, the manipulation of family circumstances, demonstrates a troubling willingness to weaponize the legal system against his wife." She awarded Sophia temporary full physical custody, with Ethan receiving supervised visitation pending the full divorce trial. "Furthermore," Judge Rivera continued, "I'm ordering an investigation into the false police report filed against Mrs. Wallace. If evidence supports deliberate harassment, I will consider sanctions." As they left the courthouse, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine hope. The battle wasn't over. Ethan would fight the final divorce proceedings with everything he had. But for the first time since finding those papers in his briefcase, she felt like she was winning. "How does it feel to have your daughters back where they belong?" Julia asked as they stood on the courthouse steps. Sophia looked up at the gray December sky, thinking about Layla and Zoe waiting for her at her mother's house, thinking about the long legal battle still ahead, thinking about the life she was building from the wreckage of her marriage. "It feels like coming back to life," she said. The emergency custody ruling had been a devastating blow to Ethan's strategy, but Sophia knew better than to assume victory. In her paralegal days, she'd seen desperate people resort to increasingly dangerous tactics when their backs were against the wall. She didn't have to wait long to see what form Ethan and Tessa's desperation would take. The first attack came through social media. Sophia woke up on Tuesday morning to find her phone buzzing with notifications from friends and acquaintances, all asking if she was okay and if the stories going around were true. Someone had created anonymous accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, posting carefully crafted messages that painted her as an unstable mother who was manipulating the legal system to steal her children from their loving father. The posts were sophisticated, designed to look like concerned observations from worried friends rather than coordinated character assassination. They referenced specific incidents: Sophia screaming at a school volunteer meeting, her erratic behavior at the grocery store, her inappropriate relationship with her divorce attorney. Each post was accompanied by grainy photos that had clearly been taken without her knowledge, showing her in moments of normal stress or concentration that were now being reframed as evidence of instability. "They're good at this," Jordan said, when Sophia showed him the post during their meeting that afternoon. "Professional-level reputation management, but in reverse. This isn't amateur hour." Julia's expression was grim as she scrolled through the social media attacks. "The timing is strategic. They're trying to influence potential witnesses and create a narrative that the custody ruling was a mistake. Judge Rivera won't see this directly, but it's designed to make people in your social circle question your fitness as a mother." That evening brought an escalation that made Sophia's blood run cold. She was helping Zoe with homework when the doorbell rang insistently. Through the window, she saw 2 police officers on her doorstep, their expressions serious and alert. "Mrs. Wallace, we received a report of domestic violence at this address." Someone called saying they heard screaming and what sounded like a child in distress. Sophia's heart pounded as she invited the officers inside, where they could see both girls sitting peacefully at the kitchen table, their homework spread out between them. Lila looked up with curiosity while Zoe waved cheerfully at the uniformed visitors. "As you can see, officers, my daughters are fine. We've been doing homework for the past hour." The younger officer looked around the peaceful domestic scene with obvious confusion. The caller was quite specific about hearing screaming and crying. They said it sounded like someone was being hurt. "I can assure you that no one has been hurt in this house," Sophia said calmly, though inside she was calculating the implications. Another official police report, another entry in the system that could be used to support claims about her instability. After The officers left. Sophia called Julia immediately. "They're not just trying to influence public opinion anymore," Julia said. "They're trying to create an official record that supports their narrative. Multiple police calls, even if they're unfounded, start to look like a pattern." The pattern became clear over the next few days. Anonymous calls to the school counselor expressing concern about the girl's emotional well-being. A report to Child Protective Services claiming that Sophia was emotionally abusing her daughters by turning them against their father. Each call was carefully calibrated, serious enough to generate an official response, but vague enough to avoid charges for filing false reports. "It's death by 1,000 cuts," Julia explained during their emergency strategy session. "They can't prove you're unfit, so they're trying to create so many official inquiries that the pattern itself becomes evidence." But Jordan's surveillance was paying dividends. His latest photos showed Tessa meeting with Marcus Chun, the owner of a digital marketing firm that specialized in what they euphemistically called reputation management. The same firm, Jordan discovered, that had recently been hired by several high-profile clients embroiled in public scandals. "She's paying professionals to destroy your reputation," Jordan said, sliding the photos across Julia's conference table. "But she's also creating a paper trail that proves conspiracy to defame." The breakthrough came when Jordan managed to obtain Tessa's phone records through a private investigators network. The calls to the police, the school, and CPS all traced back to burner phones purchased with credit cards linked to Tessa's accounts. "She's not as smart as she thinks," Julia said with satisfaction. "Using different phones but paying for them with traceable payment methods. We can prove she orchestrated this entire campaign." Meanwhile, Sophia was dealing with the psychological toll of the constant attacks. Every interaction with teachers, neighbors, or other parents was now filtered through the knowledge that someone might be watching, recording, or interpreting her behavior as evidence of instability. The stress was real and exhausting, but she was determined not to let it show. Her salvation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the couple's therapist Ethan had chosen for their sessions, called with an unusual request. "Mrs. Wallace, I hope you don't mind my reaching out directly, but I've been following the legal proceedings with some concern. I wanted to let you know that if your attorney needs professional testimony about your mental state during our sessions, I'm prepared to provide it." I thought therapist-patient privilege would prevent that. It would, under normal circumstances. But Mr. Wallace's attorney has already subpoenaed my session notes as evidence of your emotional instability. Once they've waived privilege, I'm free to provide a complete picture of what I observed. Dr. Hendricks' testimony would be devastating to Ethan's case. Her professional notes documented his manipulation tactics, his efforts to gaslight Sophia during their sessions, and her own clinical assessment that Sophia showed no signs of the instability Ethan had claimed to be concerned about. As February arrived, the attacks intensified one final time. Tessa, perhaps sensing that their legal strategy was failing, made a desperate play that would ultimately seal their fate. She announced her pregnancy. The news came through Ethan's attorney, presented as a factor that Judge Rivera should consider in the final custody determination. A stable two-parent household, they argued, would be better for Leela and Zoe than continued exposure to their mother's documented instability. But Sophia had learned to be suspicious of convenient timing. She asked Jordan to investigate, and his findings were damning. Medical records showed that Tessa had visited multiple fertility clinics over the past 6 months, not for pregnancy-related care, but for consultations about her inability to conceive. The pregnancy was a fabrication, supported by fake ultrasound, images purchased online, and a carefully staged announcement designed to influence the custody proceedings. "She's desperate," Julia said when they reviewed the evidence. "This is the kind of move people make when they know they're losing everything." Judge Rivera was not amused when presented with evidence of the fake pregnancy during a pretrial hearing. Her voice was ice cold as she addressed Ethan's attorney. "Mr. Blackwood, are you telling this court that your clients have presented false medical information as evidence in a custody proceeding?" The hearing room was silent as Blackwood struggled to distance himself from his client's deception. Within an hour, Tessa's fake pregnancy was exposed, her credibility destroyed, and Ethan's legal strategy in ruins. The divorce trial began on a bitter March morning, 6 months after Sophia had first discovered the papers in Ethan's briefcase. The intervening months had transformed her from a woman reacting to betrayal into someone who understood exactly how powerful she could be. When she stopped trying to please everyone and started fighting for what mattered. The courtroom was packed with observers, journalists covering the tech industry, scandal, lawyers interested in the complex financial issues, and family members supporting both sides. Sophia's mother sat in the front row, her presence a quiet reminder of the strength that ran through generations of women in their family. Ethan's legal team had been restructured after the fake pregnancy debacle. Richard Blackwood had been replaced by Amanda Foster, a lawyer known for her aggressive tactics in high-stakes divorces. But the damage to their case was already extensive, and Foster was essentially trying to rebuild a strategy that had been systematically dismantled over months of poor decisions. Julia's opening statement was a masterpiece of controlled fury. "Your Honor, this case is about more than the dissolution of a marriage. It's about a man who systematically weaponized the legal system against his wife, who used his wealth and influence to manufacture evidence of mental instability, and who enlisted his mistress in a campaign of harassment and defamation designed to steal custody of children from their primary caregiver." She methodically laid out the evidence, the offshore accounts, the surveillance photos of the affair, the recordings of Ethan's gaslighting, the false police reports, the social media smear campaign, and finally, the fake pregnancy that had destroyed any remaining credibility. "Mr. Wallace didn't just betray his wife's trust," Julia continued. "He betrayed the trust of this court by presenting false evidence and orchestrating false reports. He turned their marriage into a legal strategy and their children into pawns in a game designed to maximize his financial advantage while minimizing his parental responsibilities." When Ethan took the stand 3 days into the trial, he was a shadow of the confident CEO who had once commanded boardrooms. Foster tried to rehabilitate his image, positioning him as a dedicated father who had made mistakes but deserved a chance to rebuild his relationship with his daughters. But Julia's cross-examination was devastating. "Mr. Wallace, how many of your daughter's parent-teacher conferences did you attend in the past 2 years?" My work schedule is very demanding." "None, Mr. Wallace. The answer is none." "How many of their medical appointments?" "Sophia usually handles." "None. How many?" "School plays, recitals, or sporting events." The questioning continued for hours, each answer revealing the extent to which Ethan had abdicated his parental responsibilities while claiming to be a devoted father. Julia presented evidence of every missed bedtime story, every forgotten birthday, every promise broken in favor of business obligations. "And yet," Julia said, her voice rising with controlled indignation, "you believed you were entitled to take these children away from the parent who has been their constant, devoted caregiver for their entire lives?" When Tessa took the stand, ostensibly as a character witness for Ethan, her credibility had already been destroyed by the fake pregnancy revelation. Julia's questioning focused on the systematic campaign of harassment and the professional reputation management firm Tessa had hired to destroy Sophia's standing in the community. "Ms. Lang, are you familiar with the legal concept of criminal conspiracy?" Foster objected, but Judge Rivera allowed the question. "You orchestrated false police reports, hired professionals to create defamatory social media content, and fabricated medical evidence to influence custody proceedings. In what world did you believe these actions were appropriate? Tessa's answers were evasive and defensive, but the damage was done. She had revealed herself as someone willing to use any means necessary to achieve her goals, regardless of the impact on two innocent children. Dr. Hendrick's testimony was the final nail in Ethan's case. Her professional assessment of the couple's counseling sessions painted a clear picture of manipulation and emotional abuse that contradicted every claim Ethan had made about Sophia's mental state. In my professional opinion, Dr. Hendricks concluded, Mrs. Wallace demonstrated remarkable emotional stability throughout our sessions, especially considering that she was being systematically manipulated and gaslighted by her husband. Her responses were entirely appropriate to the circumstances she was facing. When Sophia finally took the stand on the trial's final day, she felt the same calm focus that had carried her through every challenge of the past 6 months. Mrs. Wallace, Julia asked, why did you leave your legal career? Because Ethan and I agreed that our family would benefit from having one parent fully dedicated to raising our children. I believed in his vision for the company, and I wanted to support his success while ensuring our daughters had the attention and care they deserved. Do you regret that decision? Sophia thought about the question carefully, aware that her answer would be analyzed and quoted in the media coverage that would follow. I regret that my sacrifice was used against me. I regret that my dedication to our family was characterized as weakness rather than strength. But I don't regret being the kind of mother who puts her children first. And I don't regret discovering that I'm stronger than anyone, including myself, ever imagined. Judge Rivera's final ruling took almost an hour to deliver. She awarded Sophia full physical custody of both children, with Ethan receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The financial settlement included substantial spousal support, designed to compensate Sophia for the career opportunities she had sacrificed, and a division of assets that took into account the hidden wealth Ethan had tried to conceal. Furthermore, Judge Rivera concluded, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges related to filing false police reports and conspiracy to commit fraud. As they left the courthouse, Sophia felt the weight of 6 months of battle lifting from her shoulders. The legal war was over, but the real work of rebuilding was just beginning. 6 months after the trial, Sophia stood in the law school library at Boston University, surrounded by casebooks and legal journals, preparing for her first-year constitutional law exam. At 40, she was older than most of her classmates, but her paralegal experience and hard-won understanding of the legal system gave her advantages that youth couldn't match. The path back to law hadn't been easy. Juggling coursework with full-time parenting, managing the emotional aftermath of her divorce, and rebuilding her identity after years of defining herself primarily as Ethan's wife, it had all required the same methodical determination that had carried her through the divorce proceedings. But she was thriving in ways she'd never imagined possible. Her apartment in Cambridge was smaller than the brownstone she'd shared with Ethan, but it felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years. Layla had decorated her room with posters of female scientists and mathematicians, while Zoe had chosen a dance theme that reflected her growing passion for ballet. Both girls seemed to have inherited their mother's resilience, adapting to their new life with the kind of grace that made Sophia proud every day. "Mom," Leela called from the kitchen, where she was helping Zoe with homework. "Jordan's here." Sophia looked up from her constitutional law notes to see Jordan Ackerman standing in her doorway, a bottle of wine in one hand and a congratulatory smile on his face. "I heard through the grapevine that someone aced her midterms," he said. News travels fast in the legal community, especially when it involves someone who took down one of Boston's most arrogant tech CEOs. Jordan's expression grew more serious. "Actually, I have some news you might find interesting. Ethan's company is being investigated by the SEC for financial irregularities. Sophia wasn't surprised. The forensic accounting Julia had commissioned for the divorce had uncovered enough questionable practices to raise red flags with federal regulators. What kind of irregularities? The offshore accounts were just the beginning. Turns out he's been manipulating company valuations to inflate his net worth for investors while hiding assets for tax purposes. Classic securities fraud. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. Athene's attempt to hide assets during their divorce had exposed financial crimes that could land him in federal prison. "How are the girls handling the supervised visits?" Jordan asked. "Better than I expected. Lila sees through his attempts to manipulate them, and Zoe is just happy to see him without all the tension that used to surround our family interactions." It was true. The court-mandated supervision had actually improved Ethan's relationship with his daughters by forcing him to focus on them rather than using their time together as an opportunity to gather intelligence or undermine Sophia's parenting. And Tessa hasn't been seen at any of the visits. I think the criminal charges for filing false reports convinced her to distance herself from the whole situation. An hour later, Julia Mercatho arrived for their weekly dinner tradition, a ritual they'd started during the darkest days of the legal battle and continued as a celebration of their friendship and professional partnership. "I have news," Julia announced as she uncorked the wine Jordan had brought. "The Massachusetts Bar Association wants to interview you for their magazine. They're doing a feature on women who've overcome legal challenges to pursue law careers." Sophia considered the request. 6 months ago, the idea of publicly discussing her divorce would have terrified her. But she'd learned that her story had power not just for her own healing, but for other women facing similar manipulation and abuse. "I think I'd like that," she said finally. "Other women need to know that they can fight back, that they're stronger than they think." "Speaking of fighting back," Julia said, pulling out her phone, "you should see this." The article was from TechCrunch, with the headline, "Former CEO Ethan Wallace sentenced to 18 months for securities fraud." The photo showed Ethan in handcuffs, his face haggard and defeated, a stark contrast to the confident executive who had once graced magazine covers as one of Boston's most promising entrepreneurs. Tessa Lang received 6 months for her role in the false police reports, Julia added. "Turns out judges really don't like it when people weaponize the system against domestic violence victims." That evening, after Jordan and Julia had left and the girls were asleep, Sophia sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop, working on a law review article about the legal system's vulnerability to manipulation by wealthy abusers. It was academic work, but it felt deeply personal, a way to transform her experience into something that might help other women recognize and resist similar tactics. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart raced with the old fear that Ethan or Tessa had found new ways to harass her. But when she opened the message, she found something entirely different. "Mrs. Wallace, this is Sarah Martinez. I'm going through a divorce similar to yours. My attorney gave me your contact information. Would you be willing to talk?" Sophia stared at the message for a long moment, thinking about the woman behind it, someone just beginning the journey that Sophia had completed. Someone who needed to know that she wasn't alone, that she was stronger than she knew, that the system could work for her if she learned how to use it. She typed back quickly, "Of course. Let's talk tomorrow." 3 weeks later, Sophia walked into Suffolk County Family Court as a law student intern, assigned to help women navigate high-conflict divorce cases. She was no longer the person seeking justice. She was the person helping others find it. The courtroom was the same one where Judge Rivera had awarded her custody of her daughters, where she discovered her own strength and reclaimed her life. But now she entered it with different purpose, carrying files for 3 women whose stories echoed her own. Wives who had sacrificed careers only to have that sacrifice used against them. Mothers facing false claims of instability, women learning that they were more formidable than anyone had ever imagined. As she helped her first client organize evidence for her custody hearing, Sophia thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago. Trusting, vulnerable, unprepared for the systematic destruction of everything she'd built. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood exactly how powerful she could be when she stopped trying to please everyone and started fighting for what mattered. Leela's school essay, "The Strongest Woman I Know," was framed on Sophia's desk at home. The final paragraph read, "My mom taught me that being strong doesn't mean you never get hurt. It means that when someone tries to hurt you, you don't just survive, you learn how to make sure they can't hurt anyone else the same way." Sophia Lynn Wallace had found her divorce papers in her husband's briefcase. But what she'd really found was herself, and a purpose that would define the rest of her life. The legal battle was over. The real work was just beginning. Up next we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.